you. And for reaction to these new developments in the war with Ukraine, both here and abroad, we're joined by Andrij Dobriansky, Communications Director for the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. Nice to see you. I first want to just get your reaction to Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and other Republican leaders, their trip to Ukraine.
A great follow-up to the House Speaker and her trip. There were a few people who were commenting that that trip was a partisan trip. It's great to see that the sides have been equalized. A number of very solid Ukraine supporters alongside Senator Mitch McConnell, not least of which Senator Barrasso, one of the leaders of the Ukraine caucus. We saw Senator Corden there, Senator Susan Collins, all people with familiarity with Ukraine. Very productive trip as far as I'm hearing, especially when you have people familiar with Ukraine getting access back into Kyiv.
And we're seeing more and more people. We saw even Angelina Jolie last week, I think it was. I want to go to Finland now, and it looks like the country will be joining NATO despite threats from Putin. Could the country come under attack if it doesn't? And how do you see this playing out?
I would definitely expect that anything that happens in Finland would be some antagonistic efforts by Russia. We do know that there has been some electricity supply issues between Russia and Finland, whether that's gas supply, whether that's the fact that electricity is shared on some parts of the border. But let's not make a light of this. This is the largest border with a NATO country that Russia will have. Russia already shares a fairly large border with Norway that people don't really think about. It was the only border that Russia shared with NATO up until up until other countries joining later on. It was Turkey and Norway that were the border countries with the Soviet Union.
And what about Sweden?
Sweden doesn't touch, so Finland curls around, and so Sweden doesn't necessarily touch the Russian border. However, the important thing is on the southern side. So now you will have all the Scandinavian countries in NATO, and that means the entire waterway of the Baltic Sea extending into the North Sea. Anything that Russia wants to do in terms of transversing that space, that's something it has to come into agreement with all NATO countries now.
Okay, and let's go back to the ground war in Ukraine and the war zone in the east. What has Russia accomplished or not accomplished there? And if the Russians can't take the east, what next? Where do they go?
Well, Russia is concentrating, I would say, more on the south. They're looking at the southern border, which is this border with the Black Sea. They want to extend their control of that entire border area. They've been trying to get out of Crimea and further west, very hampered by Ukraine's control of that area, the natural terrain, the many deltas that require you to cross bridges. And now, obviously, as we saw with the pontoon bridge situation in the east, that's something that just concentrates all their APCs onto one road, and it's just impossible for them to do a large assault of Odessa and go further all the way into Moldova, as some have speculated. So I will anticipate that there will be a lot of movement back and forth over the line. This is something that's been happening in Ukraine regularly over the last 8 years. But now with this open hot war, the thing that people need to realize when they hear these numbers of the authorization of a lot of military aid for Ukraine, this is a European land war. Think of this as any World War II movie you've seen, or the historic footage. You go into any European town and you see buildings with bullet holes. It is just a lot of ammunition being fired on both sides. That's why the costs are so high.
And let's talk about this aid package for Ukraine. We've been talking a lot about various aid packages going. There was a $40 billion package. It was blocked by Senator Rand Paul this week. Do you fear Americans are growing weary of funding the war? I mean, what happens if America starts scaling back support?
I don't think America is wary. I don't think the world is wary of supporting Ukraine. I think we saw earlier today that Ukraine won Eurovision by the largest public vote in history. So what is happening in the Senate is that the Senate would like to get this passed by unanimous consent, so they don't have to go through a long process of going according to procedure as far as passing this. If they get unanimous consent, this bill can pass as quickly as it does in the House. What Senator Paul is doing is putting up a roadblock to it. This is what he does on numerous bills. But if you see only one senator out of 100 doing this, I don't think that signals anything as far as America's retreating from supporting Ukraine. America is fully behind Ukraine. We see that in numerous statements and by the White House, by congressmen, by senators.
All right, Andrij Dobriansky, thank you as always.
Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.